Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Coming Clean with the Dirty Dozen. My name is Aron Arngrimsson, and I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm the founder and creator of the expedition company Dirty Dozen Expeditions. So usually what we do for our day job, we're running on expeditions to Truk Lagoon, Bikini Atoll, Galapagos, Myanmar, Chernobyl, you name it. We're all about adventures, but in the light of COVID-19, just like all of us, we're in the confines of our own home, right? And just like all of you, we're just about to go stir bat crazy. So our team got together and we decided we wanted to do a bit of a community project to reach out to the diving community and bring out all our special guests, all our friends, and just start talking online, right? And since we're on a Facebook Live broadcast, you have the opportunity to make a comment in the comment section and interact with all these people. So please remember that during the broadcast. So bringing the finest explorers into your living room twice a week, we have Jill Heinerth. But before I introduce her as the first guest, I just want to say a special thank you to the people behind the scenes of the production. So Jeff, do you wanna come over here somewhere? Hey Jeff, how are you?
Hello.
So Jeff Crichton
Hi.
is an old friend of mine for 10 years. We've been all over the world together. He's running GWC Media, doing this kind of work on Formula One normally, but here we are now. Thanks, Jeff, for all your help.
No problem.
And then obviously we have Victoria Brown. She's our content creator and dive industry guru. If you've been to any dive show around the world, the likelihood that you met her is very high. So she's going to be taking your questions during the show and asking them to our special guests. So thanks so much for that, Vic.
No worries, guys. See you later.
Okay, so let's start talking about our first guest tonight, Jill Heinerth. She's a Canadian cave diver, underwater explorer, writer, photographer, and filmmaker. She's a veteran of over 30 years of filming, photography, and exploration on projects in submerged caves around the world. She's made TV series, consulted on movies, written several books, and is a frequent corporate keynote speaker. Jill is the first explorer in residence for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. She is a recipient of Canada's prestigious Polar Medal and is a fellow of the International Scuba Divers Hall of Fame. And that's just to start with. She's a tour de force explorer. She's the deepest female cave diver in history, a dynamic documentary maker, an award-winning photographer and cinematographer, and an author of her new book, Into the Planet, My Life as a Cave Diver. Okay, and that's something we're going to be discussing during the broadcast as well. So without any further ado, Jill, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Hey, welcome to the show. So good
Thanks.
to see you. It's not so long since we were diving together, only a couple of months actually.
No, I know. It was like the last great trip of a lifetime, like right before everything closed down.
Oh, do you remember Truk actually like closed down like 2 days after we arrived or something?
We were pretty lucky to get in there, lucky to have
get
an amazing
out.
trip, and lucky to get home.
So how are you? Where are you?
I'm good. I'm just south of Ottawa, Canada. At home. Yeah, like everybody else at home.
So what are the conditions of the lockdown at its current status in Canada?
It's basically, stay at home and go out as little as possible for groceries or exercise or medicine, essentially. But I'm very lucky. I live on the Trans-Canada Trail, so I go out and walk and ride my bike, which is awesome. And I'm really looking forward to spring coming soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How have you been entertaining yourself during the lockdown, being inside?
Well, I've been doing a lot more reading and writing and pitching new proposals. Everything that I have for the rest of the year pretty much has been canceled. So, new reality like everyone else. Trying to think about, where the next income might come from.
Exactly.
But yeah, we're all in the same boat.
Is there anything you do, like daily relaxation techniques, any mental prep that you do to get through the day inside?
Oh, well, for me, just getting outdoors is like so important.
Yeah.
And we're so lucky to be able to be connected around the world with people. That's really, really great too. Yeah.
What kind of content have you been making recently with all this time?
Well, I've been, writing. I'm starting to think about my next book, my next kid's book, and trying to do new pitches basically for new projects. Some journalism for, well, the Globe and Mail in Canada asked me to do a little article on isolation and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I remember on our trip in January, you managed to give ourselves an exclusive preview of your new documentary, Under Thin Ice.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a chance for the audience here to get access to it, free access to it?
Well, if you're in Canada, you can get it free streaming on CBC Gem. We had it out for a couple weeks in the US, and I'm trying to see if the producers might be able to extend that somehow. So stand by in the US. Other parts of the world, I think probably the best thing is to Google it because there's a lot of different links that you can get to. But you can also go to the app, which is free, called Discover the Arctic, and it's on Android and Mac for free.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So how about the book, Into the Planet? It's been out for a while now, but for those that haven't heard about it yet, as we discussed one of the chapters actually, where can they find it online?
Easiest thing is just to go to Amazon around the world. It was released in September, so it's been out for a bit. But it takes a village to sell a book, so please spread the word on that. It's it's about my travels and expeditions and life all around the world, but it's also about fear. So it's kind of topical these days. I think
absolutely.
people might get something out of it beyond just the excitement of diving and cave diving.
And that kind of brings me to the topic of the episode tonight, Bent, an honest conversation. And before I kind of give the introduction and we start going through everything, I just want to start asking you, Jill, because many people here might not know, how did you actually, or where and how and when did you start diving?
Oh gosh, I wanted to dive from the time I was the littlest kid, but didn't have the sort of money and the means until I was in university. But I learned to dive in Canada in a place called Tobermory, which is now an underwater national marine park and full of incredible shipwrecks. So
excellent.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful place to dive.
So let's get straight to it. So when we talk about the bends or DCI, it's commonly referred to as a wrongdoing in the diving community, where the diver often experiencing symptoms is seen or assumed at fault. This, in my belief, creates a certain stigma about the subject. And I don't think most people have realized, at least, that in the technical diving community, that a huge number of industry professionals have been bent during their career.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's a shame. When I learned to dive, we actually called them like deserved hits or undeserved hits, which is crazy. And, when I got bent, it was almost about 20 years ago now. And at the time when I started putting stuff out into magazines, the first one that published it was a BSAC, British Sub-Aqua Club magazine, and people wrote back saying, "Are you nuts? This is like career suicide, telling people you've been bent." And I'm like, no. And we got to start having honest conversations about this. And it seems kind of fitting for your theme right now of coming clean, because here we all are from our households, in our pajamas and not having had a shower in a couple months.
I'm wearing shorts underneath, by the way.
Yeah, right. Life is getting a lot more honest and open these days. So good theme, good time to talk about DCS. Yeah, why not?
Exactly. So when we talk about the variables in getting bent, they can be huge, whether it concerns your own physiology, equipment, water condition, or planning. But something I just remember from talking to you in Truck in January is as long as we come out of it healthy and can resume diving, I remember us talking about our experiences being bent as being kind of blessings, because we're still here, we're still healthy, and we're still diving.
Yeah.
So Jill, How about you come clean with me and tell me about how and when you got bent?
Yeah. Oh, I look back on it. It's definitely as a gift because I'm a better, smarter diver today as a result. I was on an expedition. My husband at the time and I had discovered the pit in Mexico, a place that many people might have been to in the last few years. I mean, it's definitely wide open for tourism right now. And
Yeah,
we'd actually
absolutely.
discovered it in the late 90s and the deep cave in the pit, and kind of kept it a secret for a couple of years before we were able to get
Yeah.
back there with our rebreathers. We had plans to have a support team of local divers in Mexico to assist us. And when we got there, life was too busy and the shop wouldn't release the divers to come help us in the jungle. So we decided to go on our own. And this was a time when you were still like hacking your way into the jungle to get to dive sites. And, big undertaking for two of us to just go out and camp in the bush and start to explore this cave that goes as deep as 400 feet deep.
Yeah.
And so that's how it all started.
I
all
can
started
see
with
from
not
the
having a support team that we should have been using. Yeah.
Yeah, no, just you saying the accessibility of it now. I remember when I was there, when I'm there, it's very easy to get there and very accessible dive site. But just to
Right.
read a quote from your book, exhausting hikes, makeshift donkey carts, machete wielding Maya Sherpas, and a lot of determination.
Yeah,
Sounds
that's
about
right. That's right. And that at the front of the book, actually, that is the pit.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I went back there in 2018 specifically to shoot the cover of the book. Now, authors don't usually have control over their own covers, if you can believe it or not.
No.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the publishers, major publishers want to have the control over the cover. But I specifically made the trip with dear friends to head down there, and Renata Rojas and Joe Spraza. I don't know if
Renata,
they're
yeah.
online. You know both of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, helped make that possible. And I shot the picture in the very spot where I felt the first symptoms of DCS. Yeah.
Oh my
I
God.
got bent underwater. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone gets bent from being underwater, but I felt the first symptoms underwater, which is
Yeah.
not
So take us
normal.
through the dive a little bit.
Yeah, so 2 days in a row of really deep diving. Like I say, almost 400 feet deep. The first day, we had cut our dive short, but when you cut a dive short at 400 feet, it's still a really big dive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next day, somehow I justified in my mind that it was okay to go do that deep, long dive again, which was probably my first mistake. The dive went fine, but on the way up on decompression, about 60 feet deep, I felt this weird. I thought I had ants in my dry suit. I
Yeah,
thought,
right.
I felt like something was biting into my thighs, like this weird niggling, crawling. Um, and I really did think it was insects at first, and
Yeah.
and soon, as I was kind of pulling on the fabric of my dry suit and everything, realized that no, that's not bugs. That's bends. Which is terrifying. I mean, it
Absolutely. Yeah.
when it's happening.
Yeah, and
and
when you
it's
can
pretty
feel it
scary.
underwater and you know you can't go up anyway. It's
Yeah.
it's a stressful time. Absolutely. The hang is stressful.
Yeah.
But
So
you
I
had
was using
Paul there, right?
what's that?
You had Paul with you in the water at the
Yeah.
time.
Two of us are in the water. No one topside. We're on rebreathers.
Yeah.
So you crank up the PO2, plan to stay longer underwater, and then when I got up to 20 feet, 6 meters, I crawled into a barrel that we had mounted on the ceiling of the cave that was full of air. We had a little a
Yeah.
narrow bench in there.
Yeah.
And so when I crawled up in there, I had to take off my gear. I was actually thinking at the time that part of the cause of the bend was the fact that I had too much stuff on. Like I had these bicycle shorts on that were holding diapers in place,
Yeah.
and I thought maybe they were too tight. Maybe they were constricting the blood flow in my thighs. And so my thought was, get into the deco trough, get out of my stuff, and undress basically, and make sure I have good circulation. But when I got in there and I had to lug all my gear onto this bench and then try and balance the rebreather beside me and breathe off it, it was impossible, and it was
Yeah.
really, really hot. So I expended a ton of physical effort at the worst possible time, probably made things worse, and then ended up getting back in the water.
Yeah, that's what you did. You did an IVR session, didn't you?
Well, the next day. So,
Yeah.
so I finished my dive, extended my deco, and by the time I surfaced, I thought that I was asymptomatic.
Yeah.
And then I had to climb a ladder to get out of the cenote.
Mhm.
And as I climbed, every step I felt heavier and heavier and heavier. And I left all the gear floating on the surface. But when I got to the top, I literally like rolled off the ladder into the dirt. Paul was already out of the water, and I was told him I needed help getting out of my suit. And then I just grabbed a bottle of 80%, laid
Yeah.
down, and started breathing it. So I breathed through 2 bottles of 80%, and I knew that I needed to get back in the water to do in-water recompression, but I couldn't, like, mentally, physically, I couldn't. I was too tired, too exhausted. But I did the next morning. I did in water the next morning.
There was one thing in the chapter that
Yeah.
struck me at that particular moment, and that's you coming out of the water. Obviously, you're breathing some open circuit deco gas, and you're having an uncomfortable encounter with a stout black scorpion in your tent, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So after I got out and I'm breathing the 80%, I'm
Yeah.
literally laying on like one of those thermarest mats in the jungle, and I had a mosquitero, like mosquito netting, kind of draped over me.
Yeah.
And I'm drinking water like there's no tomorrow. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, what that means is like about every 10 or 15 minutes, I had to get up and go squat in the jungle and pee. And every time I did that, like I was getting this horrible, spider webby bruising on my
Oh,
biceps and thighs. And when I was breathing the 80%, it would go away. And then when
yeah.
I dropped the regulator to go pee, it would come back.
Oh, yikes.
So I'd get back under the mosquitero and start breathing again. And as I'm laying there, at one point, there's this giant black scorpion on the inside of the mosquitero, and he's just kind of
All right.
walking up of me and
Trying to catch you.
dangling over my head. And I'm like, oh my
Yikes.
God.
Get me out of here.
And
But
finally
it's
got up, and I went over to the campfire, and I'm like, Paul, I'm bent. I'm bent. That was
yeah.
hours later, though, eh? Like, I mean, it took me hours to verbalize it.
Yeah, and it's an uncomfortable thing to say, and for somebody in your position, you're quite often used to being in charge of the situation,
Yeah.
and this is maybe a moment where that's tilting.
Yeah, I mean, I had made a plan that if either of us got bent, we'd do in-water recompression.
Yeah,
But what I didn't account for, I didn't know what you would feel like, right? I couldn't do anything to save myself when I was bent. I really needed someone else to take charge. And it wasn't until the following morning that I had enough energy to get back in the water on the rebreather and do in-water recompression, which I think helped. Probably at that point, I'm probably not dealing with treating bubbles anymore. Realistically, I'm probably giving my body hyperbaric oxygen and helping in the healing process at that point. But I needed to do that before I had enough energy to hike out of the jungle.
So I think before we go into the IVR part of the discussion, I can see some questions are popping up.
Yeah.
Vic, do you want to bring up some questions from Facebook? Are you there?
Hi.
Hey.
Yes. Hey. So we've got a question from Ken. He's popped up asking if your spiderwebs bruises went away when you were breathing the 80% mix, Jill.
Yeah, so they would get better and improve. And then when I stopped breathing the 80%, and even just in the period of time to go squat in the jungle and pee, like a few minutes, literally, it would come back worse again, which was really, it was scary. Yeah.
I've got another question here asking, actually it's a bit off topic, asking about your children's books, asking for a link for your children's books. I can't find them on Amazon, Jill. Where can you find the children's books?
Yeah, Chester the Manatee and the Very, Very Terribly Bad Itch. It's actually available also on Amazon in a bunch of different languages, but you can also go to my Facebook page or my YouTube channel because I have done a recording reading it for all you people that are stuck at home with kids and need about a 20-minute break.
Yeah,
You can
right.
put this on and I'll read the book to your kids.
Excellent. There you go, Barnaby. That's a question. And when you evaluated the dive afterwards, did anything in your profile stick out? I think you'll probably go into that a little bit. So Jason, hold fire on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yes and no. I think what sticks out for me is just that I shouldn't have done those 2 days in a row. I mean,
Mm.
I mean, you always look back and you go, okay, I got bent. My buddy didn't get bent. Why is that? And we don't always know. Although there was one factor in retrospect, looking back. And I did a lot of research on this afterwards and wrote some articles about women and decompression sickness. So women are no more likely to get bent than men if they have equal training, equipment, background, yada, yada, yada. So if the playing field is equal, a woman's not going to be more likely to get bent. However, according to the research, she is more likely to get bent either right before or during her period, right? So on that 1 out of 4 weeks, that fit my profile at the time. So was that a contributing factor? Possibly. We don't know. Hard to say. Really hard to say.
Yeah.
And it's something that is really easy for a normal diver to do, is that they look at solutions, dive computers, training organizations, their certifications, and think everything is the end-all answer of not getting bent. But there's so many variables in charge.
Yeah, well, I mean, those were still are edgy dives for, we don't have a lot of women that are doing that kind of diving, so we don't have a statistical base. But even, do I have a PFO? Maybe. I don't know. For those that don't know what a PFO is, a patent foramen ovale is an opening in between the two sides of the heart. And you can shunt bubbles from one side to the other and bypass the lungs so that you don't get off gas. And basically you're injecting bubbles into your circulation. 1 out of 3 people have some degree of a PFO. It's at birth, you have that hole, and for most people it heals. Some completely, some partially, some not at all. And if you have a PFO, you're more likely to get bent. And you could have an entire busy technical diving career like mine and never get bent and have a PFO. So anything's possible.
Absolutely.
Great.
So thank you so much, Vic, for bringing those questions up. All right. Should we get back to it? So where were we? The IVR attempt, the next day. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So I see someone actually asked here, Victor says, did I have a solid recompression plan? Yeah. So I was using Comex commercial dive tables for in-water recompression at the time. And some modification of that, I suppose. Really, like when you're on your own and there isn't a team supporting you for in-water recompression, then obviously there are big risks there. I mean, I went down to 40 feet and was cranking up my PO2 as high as I could get it. And then slowly, after a couple hours there, slowly came up like a foot a minute back to the surface. And I did feel considerably better after that, well enough that I was able to make the hike out of the jungle and get myself to the highway where I could then head off to the recompression chamber in Playa.
Yeah, I heard you had a muddy ride to Playa.
Yeah. So I got most of the way out of the jungle when one of these sort of uncovered jungle vehicles picked me up and we made the ride into Playa. Yeah.
So you're in Playa. You're with Dr. Medina, is that right? And what did he say? How was the treatment schedule like? Like, how did he greet you?
Well, like I had already written down all of my dive profile just by reviewing the computer and writing it into my notebook because we didn't have the ability to download things back then. And told him what I'd done and told him how I treated myself in the jungle. And he's like, what planet did you come from?
This is 20 years ago.
Like, where did you find that kind of depth in Mexico,
Yeah.
and I've never treated a helium bend. So maybe you want to like go to Cozumel or Cancun and get someone who's treated a helium bend before. Plus, he had two people in the chamber,
Yeah, a
and
student and an instructor, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And at that point, I just said, "Listen, I've come so far. You have no idea what it took me to hike out of the jungle and get here.
Yeah.
I'll hang tight until these guys are out." Yeah.
And what was your treatment schedule like?
I did 3 standard 6-hour
Yeah.
runs and then an additional, hyperbaric O2, shorter, like 2.5-hour one. And some of the later ones were with the other 2 that had been in the chamber.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You
The
had
first
company.
time, first time they put you in, they're watching you pretty closely, and later when everyone's doing a lot better, they put they put the 3 of us in together without a tender.
Right.
And, yeah.
So I remember from my own bend, I had 3 treatments, and I remember the
Mhm.
first one not being very painful. The
Mhm.
second one was very painful, and the third one was okay. How did it go for you?
I felt much better during the treatment on the first one, and
Yeah.
about 2 or 3 hours after the first treatment, I felt the worst of the entire experience. Um, so I felt like I'd been run over by a truck and dragged, is the way I put it. Um, and the next day when I walked back into the clinic to see what was next, I remember saying to Dr. Medina, I'm like, "I hurt everywhere." And I was already thinking about, what's my next career? And he's like, "Oh, good." And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, right.
He says, "Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, pain is
It's a good
good. It
thing. Yeah.
means you're healing."
Stuff is waking up.
Right. Yeah, pretty much.
Hey,
Mm.
actually, I have a question here from Jeff Pack. Hey, Jeff. He's asking you about this. In my discussions on DCS risk with Simon Mitchell, physical conditioning plays a
Mhm.
large part. What do you think
Yeah.
about it? You agree?
Uh, I mean, I think anyone can get bent. I mean, just because you're fit doesn't mean you're not gonna get bent. And, the PFO example is part of that. Fit people have PFOs.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even know they have a PFO.
Mm.
I think physical fitness probably plays a really big part in how well you recover
Mm.
afterwards, for sure. Um, yeah.
And I can just take from my own experience when I
Mhm.
had our technical diving school in Dahab, and we were diving 5-6 days a week, anywhere between 40 and 100 meter range.
Mhm.
So it was constant, it was often, and you would monitor yourself quite closely. This is 8 years ago or whatever. I was much younger. And it was the physical fitness, it was hydration, but it just
Mhm.
went really far. You started
Mhm.
assessing your mental state,
Mhm.
uh,
I think it's everything. I mean, I've been with a dive partner in a cave when he got stuck. We were in zero vis doing some exploration, both on
yeah.
rebreathers, and he got wedged. And he was pretty new to rebreather cave exploration. He was quite a seasoned explorer. But when he got stuck, he's sort of like he's yelling out to me, "I'm stuck," and I'm like, "Just wait." And he's like, "What?" I'm like, "Wait." Like in 5 minutes, the silt's gonna blow out. We're on rebreathers. Just like stay stuck for 5 minutes and we'll sort
Exactly.
it out.
That's the beauty of
Um,
rebreathers, right?
yeah, yeah, and he got bent on that
Yeah.
dive, and I couldn't think of any physical reason why he got bent, but I think, perhaps, part of the contributing factors that day was the fear, the mental,
Mhm.
difference between the 2 of us. I don't know, I'm sure that your state of mind plays a factor in things.
But also an important part of being bent is, you grow up a little bit in terms of your diving activities. I certainly
Yeah,
remember how I used to dive before I got bent and how
yeah.
I dived after I got bent, and I matured a lot.
Mhm.
And from a risk assessment view, how I dive in 2020 is completely different than what it is in 2012.
Yeah, I'll admit that, I mean, that was many, many thousands of dives into my career, and I'll admit that, neither my husband or I had been bent before after many thousands of dives, and I
Mm.
didn't think it was gonna happen to me. So when it did, it was kind of like, whoa. And then after that, I realized that anyone can get bent on a big
Yeah.
dive, a little dive any day. It is a sports injury.
And
And
it's a gray zone, right? There's niggles, there's the rest of
yeah.
it. You start noticing things better.
Well, and I think, DCS is not black or white. It's very gray. And some of those days that you might have gone home exhausted, but not symptomatic, may have been DCS as well. Yeah.
And so after you got treated in the chamber, obviously, did you
Yeah.
have any kind of residual symptoms? How could you sleep during the night? So during and after.
It was 5 weeks before the symptoms were gone, and at first the doctor said to me, "Never dive again. You're done."
Yeah, that was that earworm. You're never diving
Never
again.
dive again. And of course, I did not take his advice. But he did say to me, "If you choose to ignore my advice, wait until all the symptoms are done, then wait that long again, and
Yeah.
then very, very slowly and cautiously resume your diving." But at the time, he was saying, "Don't ever dive on helium, don't dive deep," or whatever. So I waited 5 weeks before all the pain was gone. And then
Yeah.
I waited another 5 weeks before I got in the water. And then my first dive was 6 meters on pure O2 because I thought, oh, I won't get bent, but I can get back in the water.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So that kind of answers one of our Facebook questions from 360 Observe, because they're talking about how you had to adapt your diving style afterwards. But I have a question from Javier Mahad. He's
Hey,
asking, what do you learn from your experience in terms of planning diving expeditions in remote locations?
Yeah, I'm much more conservative. And I also think it's really important that you have like SOPs, standard operational procedures, practices. Like I have to write manuals, safety manuals like that for projects that I'm on, films, movies, expeditions. But I think when you go through the process of doing that and you look at what's everything that could go wrong and how are we going to deal with it, and then everybody on the team has that in place, and that's extremely valuable when something does happen. The little video clip that's showing is actually
Yeah.
me in truck with Aron.
Yeah, that's right. This is a couple
and
months
with
ago.
Joseph Raza there. And we're
Yeah.
using Aaron's 30 dozen checklist, which is like a last minute check before the diver jumps in the water. So whether you're the boat captain, expedition leader, passenger, whatever, you go through a last minute checklist of your rebreather, and nobody's exempt from it. I think it's a fantastic procedure.
Yeah, I have to give Martin Critch some credit here.
Absolutely.
And it goes obviously way beyond. This was never a new idea, but he's been so good at implementing it. And I can tell you, in a season in Bikini Atoll, we do 10,000 hours in the water combined.
Right.
So having this thing is essential when you're in remote locations.
And Martin, who's the captain and owner of Truckmaster, the boat that we're on out there, so this is his procedure, and he's also a rebreather diver as well, and he's not exempt from it. So I watched him use it, and I watched a little thing get caught when he was about to jump in the water. He's like, "Oh crap, thanks."
Yeah, exactly.
It's like we all make mistakes. We all have good, bad days, whatever. So
I think
it's great procedure. Yeah.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. The only issue I ever had on the boat jumping in was the one day I did not do that check, and I am not kidding you.
That's why nobody's exempt, Aron.
Yeah, and there was one day where it happened, and it's just one of those things when you're taking care of that many people and you're being pulled in all directions. That's why I've kind of found, as my diving career gets bigger or longer, I've become a lot more conservative and a lot more procedural about things than before. I've never used checklists so much in my life than I have now.
Yeah. No, and I'm the same. And I think what's important in these things too is that we remove the hierarchy. Like some people think that they don't feel comfortable speaking up to the expedition leader or the owner or whatever else. But if everybody's on the same page, like I respect someone saying, "Hey, Jill, is your host supposed to be like that?" Or,
right.
There's some bubbles there,
Exactly.
I want people to speak up, and so you have to create that atmosphere where they can.
And it's just so important to get a safe mindset when you're on an expedition. There
Yeah.
was one funny moment when we were in Bikini in 2018, and I think Richard Lundgren was with us. He was leading a group of GOE divers in Bikini. So now they've traveled 70 hours, to get there. They've all taken holidays from work and obviously not seeing their family for a while. And there's a lot of money involved, a lot of time, everything. You get to Bikini, and we sit down and we start diving procedures briefing, which is me yapping for hours. But obviously, I'm not going to tell GUE divers what to do because I'm not one myself. So I kind of pass the mic over to Rich, and I'm like, "So, Rich, what do you want to tell the guys?" And his answer was short and blunt. Just don't f this up. But it spoke miles because I think everybody understood the gravity of the situation. Now we're here. There's no reason whatsoever to make conscious, stupid decisions because these kind of locations, truck, Bikini, all these things, they're deceitful when you're in the water because the wrecks are that good. You're there maybe once or twice, and that's going to be it. And you want to get the most out of it, but
but you got to be willing to go that far, spend all your money, and then sit a dive out, for your own good mental or physical health. That's so important. I'm so much better at that now too. Like, take a dive off. Yeah.
And that's something we have here. From James Thompson, he's asking, how did your DCI incident affect your mental state for diving afterwards?
It's a great question because we rarely talk about the mental health aspects of DCS. Afterwards, you just, like, especially since the doctor puts it in your head and says, never dive again, you're absolutely convinced that it's going to happen again. And it's very scary. I mean, every time you feel just a little pinch or a niggle of some sort, you're like, oh my God, am I bent again?
Yeah, right.
So it's tough. I mean, for me, it was completely demoralizing. This was in the early days of the internet. And when I radioed out of the jungle to Buddy Quattlebaum at the dive shop on the coast, I'm like, hey, buddy, I'm bent. I can't walk out of here. I'm too exhausted, that was heard by other dive shops in Mexico because everybody had base radios at the time. And
I
somebody
heard
put it
about
out on
this.
the internet. And then a creepy internet
divers.
troll of the day, whose name I will not mention,
Yeah.
took, Jill's too tired to walk out of the jungle and turned that into Jill can't walk. So by the time I actually did hike out of the jungle the next day and get to the chamber, the internet chat forums were all going on about how I was paralyzed in the jungle and I had, like, screwed up and got myself bent. So it was demoralizing. It was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
I don't give a crap what people think anymore, but in those days I was, 20 years younger,
absolutely.
and that was really hard.
The internet is a terrible place when you're a starting diver because it's just demoralizing. You think, do I really want to be with these people when you see some of these trolls, talking. But we got some great guests on board here because we got some good questions. So Jason Cunningham is asking, how nerve-wracking was the first big dive afterwards? How many ghosts were you feeling?
Oh, lots of ghosts. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really common, and something that we just don't talk about. But I still have ghosts for that experience. I still
Absolutely.
think pretty hard about, every deep dive that I make. And interestingly, I mean, we all know that if you get bent once, you're much more likely to get bent again, and that might be because of pre-existing conditions. It might be
Yeah.
dive habits. It might
We
be that
change.
you've
Yeah.
injured something and you're going to get hit in the same place. But here's a heads up to a
Yes.
magazine article that I wrote this month for Diver Magazine in Canada, divermag.com. You can download the issue for free, and I talked to a lot of other people that I interviewed for a year online about their own hits. And there were a lot of people on there. I kept them all anonymous, but you'll read about people who've been hit like 15 times and never gone for treatment, or, just headed home and laid on the couch with oxygen. So there is a lot of denial associated with DCS. and it's not necessarily ego and embarrassment, in my opinion. And Aron, you can let me know how you feel about this, but I really think that your brain chemistry is obviously as affected as your physical
Yeah.
chemistry. You're going through a cascade of chemical changes, and I believe that part of that denial is just screwed up brain chemistry, that you're just not capable of dealing with the issue at hand.
It's like the 6 stages of grief or whatever.
Mhm.
You go through all of them because the denial is definitely there. But at the
Yeah.
same time, compared to any niggles that I ever had and the rest of it, when I got bent, I definitely knew when the pain hit to a certain extent. You say, okay, yeah, this is not.
But didn't you
This is
just
not.
feel when your cat is injured and it won't let you help it, it just wants to crawl in a corner and be left alone? Like, I just wanted to crawl in a corner and be left alone and
Yeah,
die,
yeah,
It
exactly.
it was really like that, like,
It's
I
completely
didn't it wasn't a conscious decision for me to say, "Well, I'm not gonna tell him. I'm not gonna
no.
tell him that I'm bent," It was
But
like, "Oh, just leave me the F alone," you know?
and that's why, I mean, because this is back in 2000. This is many years ago.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you said you didn't have a support team, and that might have been a flaw in the whole process.
Yeah.
But like you say, you're normally in charge of the situation, but when it happens, you're just not. Like just like you
You
said,
can't be.
you can't be.
Yeah.
You just can't be.
Yeah, so it's really important for a dive buddy who sees that something is wrong with someone to speak up. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
if that's
absolutely.
someone that, you know, is above you in the chain of command, or whether it's, someone that you have some admiration for,
Yeah,
or you don't feel it's your place. It is your place to say something. Nobody should ever feel offended because someone's looking out for their best interests. And
exactly.
yeah.
Um, Victor Tovar is just putting out a good statement. He says definitely diving professionals should be very conservative to last, and that is a good
Hmm.
point. If we
Yep.
want to stay in this industry for a while, we have to be conservative. Uh,
Absolutely.
we have
Yeah.
another question here from 360 Observe. Hi Jill, with regards to your diving, do you have a preference for a dive computer or tables, or would this be based on the dive profile and location?
Yeah. Well, so it's probably no secret that I'm an ambassador for Cinto.
Yeah, right.
So, and so I've been using Cinto products for a long, long, long time. Um, but I really don't think that my bend had anything to do with my profile. At the time, I was diving, well, a Cislunar Mark V rebreather, and I was using a dive right computer as a kind of a loose gauge backup to it. So that was based on Hamilton decap
Mhm.
algorithm. But I really don't think that had anything to do with the bend. I mean, these days I use a 3070 uh, gradient factor in my rebreather controller. If
Yeah,
you're using gradient factors, yeah, or the Cinto fused RGBM on my backup computer. Um, but I think, there's probably, besides using a commonly employed algorithm, I think there's other things that you can do to protect yourself better. So stay hydrated, ensure that the on-gassing and off-gassing phases of your dive are similar thermally. I think you want to keep moving in really long decos so you keep the
yeah,
circulation up. I mean, you on-gassed, moving, so you should be off-gassing, moving, or it's not happening at the same
exactly.
time. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things like that. Immediately after the dive, we should not be doing physical exercise,
Mhm.
especially things where we're
Hauling
bearing
tanks.
down and,
Yeah, right.
lifting,
Yeah.
because that's more likely to, squirt some bubbles through that PFO if you have one. So yeah, I think more of those kinds of practices are more important for preventative. Yeah.
I think I have another question here from Joe from New York Sea Gypsies. Hey
Oh,
Joe, how you
Joe,
doing, brother?
hey.
He's asking when you were doing your IVR, was that on CCR or did you take a oxygen OC cylinder?
CCR. So I used my rebreather so I could get a higher PO2, and also conserve the resources, because you can imagine you start using a lot of gas on an in-water
Yeah.
recompression. The ideal thing would be with a full face mask, obviously. I did not have a full face mask.
Yeah.
Probably at the very
Especially when
least,
you're by yourself.
supervision and a gag strap would have been a really smart thing.
Yeah.
Didn't have it. Yeah. So did the best we could in the situation. But I think and in-water recompression is definitely becoming more mainstream
Absolutely.
for technical expeditionary divers. If you can't get to treatment quickly and efficiently, it's reasonable if the person's well enough to conduct
Yeah.
it. Because if you're in a remote place and you're not going to get to a chamber for a day or two, you're probably going to have a much better outcome by getting back in the water.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah.
So thanks for that, Joe. I think I just had another question roll in from Denzel Daniel. And he's asking, you said you're diving gradient factor 3070 on your CCR. Do you tweak these settings when alternating cold or warm water?
I don't. That seems to be working well for me. For years, I actually had a Doppler, and I
Yeah.
was Dopplering myself. After I got bent, I was so paranoid. Is it the algorithm? Am I doing the right thing? And Jim King had given Paul and I a Doppler, and I started using it and listening for bubbles. Now, just because you have bubbles or don't have bubbles doesn't mean you're going to get bent or not get bent, but it might be a good indication as to whether your algorithm's working for you. So once I landed on that gradient factor, I just kind of stayed there and it's worked. So yeah, it's been all right.
Yeah, it's something that I had conversations with many special guests and just many people in general. And I think that there is no right answer. I don't think anybody can say my gradient factor is the best. It doesn't work that way. We're all engineered in a different way. If
And I
it is
think
our
I
physiology or
mean
age.
maybe the one tweak that I do is staying longer on the last stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if I feel like I had a dive that was out of the ordinary, maybe more physical exercise, kicked my butt or something didn't feel quite right. I'll stay longer on the last stop.
Yeah, I agree completely. Now, there's another question just jumped in from Barnaby Selwood. Any advice for someone just about to head into tech? He's wanting to do it on Twinset and accelerate DEGO courses currently.
It just, be conservative. Use oxygen. Stay a little bit longer on DECO. Don't. One thing that I have changed, and this was based on some Dan research I was involved in too, is I used to just hang motionless, like even occasionally fall asleep on DECO, and now I move. Like I was
Yeah,
saying, if you
yeah.
on-gassed actively while you were moving and swimming, then you should expect that you need to off-gas with some, physical activity as well. Because if you're just motionless, then you're not going to off-gas at the same rate that you on-gassed. So that can be a valuable thing. I mean, we're also used to seeing people just hang perfectly, but that's probably not the best thing for them.
Yeah, get some movement in you. So Constantine, hey buddy, good to see you again. He's asking, all-time question: what do you like more, caves or wrecks?
Oh, I just like being in the water, especially now. My God,
Good
what I would
answer.
just give for a single tank dive right now.
I know.
Oh,
Aren't we all there?
I grew up on wrecks and
Yeah.
I really, really, really love caves, but I just love being in the water.
I
Tech,
think
wreck, free dive, swim, anything. I just need some contact beyond my shower.
I think for me personally, it's been a journey. So my focus has always been shifted. If it's marine life, if it's diving deep, or if you're in caves, or if you're in wrecks or in mines, like it all comes in chapters almost with your interest. That's at least how that's been for me so far. So
that's me in Newfoundland there.
oh,
no. Oh, I see. That's my book trailer. Cool.
so
A little bit of everything. Yeah.
there's a couple more questions that we have in the end. So what is your biggest takeaways, you would say, since getting hit?
That it can happen to anyone. that somebody needs to be the advocate. So, especially in the American medical system, big important point here is you need someone to advocate for you. So, someone needs to take charge. They need to get you to, the hospital, and then the hospital will get you to the chamber. But that advocate needs to be calling up Dan and connecting and pushing for your treatment. Because when you walk into a medical facility to be assessed, which is where you have to go first before chamber, you don't look sick. You walk in, you're walking, talking, peeing, and pooping. Very low priority for them. So they're much more focused on people that are acute. And so you need that advocate in there to help them understand that although you look good, the earlier that you can get your treatment, recompression, the better outcome that you are likely to have. And if you're
Absolutely.
already presenting some neurological symptoms and you're getting worse, you really need someone to move you through that system, get you cleared through the emergency assessment and on to a chamber. So that's hard in the American medical system. Really, really difficult. But in any medical system, you don't look sick most of the time unless you arrived in an ambulance. Then you're really in a bad way. So I think those are important takeaways from the experience.
And remembering that we're all here for each other. There is no stigma.
Yeah.
There is no embarrassment about getting bent.
After I got bent, like so many of my friends said, "Oh, when it happened to me, this is how I felt." And I was like, "What? I never knew you got bent. Why didn't you say something before? This is information that might have been useful." So I'll talk about it with anybody. And if want someone that's been bent, or if even if you're listening here online and you've been bent and you want someone to talk to about it, reach out.
Absolutely.
Email me, email Aron. We know what it feels like. We know how scary it is getting back in the water, and we've been there too. So
Yeah,
we're happy
getting
to
back
talk
on the
to you.
horse is not easy. It
No.
took me a while, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a couple of questions popping in. We got about 10 minutes left. So when decoying on a CCR dive, do you usually follow the curve as indicated by the two computers, or do you follow the stops as planned from the software?
Yeah. So I've got a backup computer, and I've got the controller on my rebreather, and I'll come up on the slowest profile, and I'm easing my way up on kind of a continuous deco, as opposed to like being very hard on the stops. Like I don't just sit there and then race up 3 meters and do the next one. So I'm just kind of slowly working my way up.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So we have next one. We have Alison Grundy, and good one. Which is your favorite wreck and truck? When
All
you were
of
with
them.
Was there anything
All
that
of them.
particularly
Oh
stood
my
out?
God, I love them so much. I'm going back as soon as I can. It's going to be a couple years, but I'm going back.
But soon
So
we're gonna
come
go
with
back.
me.
All right, so we got a long one here. Aron and Jill, you are from Javier Mahad. How you doing, Javier?
Hey.
Aron and Jill, you're constantly traveling with guests in your expedition or as leaders on them. What would your advice be on risk assessment with managing big groups of divers with different levels of experience and comfort? And how do you say someone that's experienced and made a considerable investment that they shouldn't do a certain dive?
Yeah, great question, Javier.
Yeah.
It's hard. I think you have to really set things up from the beginning. Like Aron does a really good job communicating. I'm going to toot your horn a bit here. Communicating with his customers in advance about what things are going to be like. Here's what to expect. Here's how we're going to run the dives. We're going to start slow, and we're going to work up. So don't expect that you're jumping into 200 feet of water on your first dive. We're going to ease our way into things, shake down our rebreathers. We're going to be conservative. We're going to be role models and sit out dives.
Yeah, right.
So I think that it's all in the setup before you leave on the trip, and then when you start those briefings. But there are times when you have to be the hard ass and do have to say to someone, "I'm sorry,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
can't do this." Yeah,
And
it's hard.
I would get this in bikini more than truck, and that's when we have these big wrecks like the Saratoga. Obviously, when you're in bikini, you want to do as much as you can, but I like to compare the Saratoga to a shopping mall past the zombie apocalypse. You have like 5 levels of hundreds of rooms everywhere, and there's stuff all over the ground, and it's the easiest place in the world to get a silt out. So it's one of those things where the people on board that are running the trip are the judge and the jury.
Yeah, well, because every choice you make is not just for yourself; it's for the
It's for the
entire
team.
Yeah, I actually went. I won't name the name or the rebreather, but I did a project in a distant place, and one of the rebreather divers brought a rebreather that was not rated for the depths that we were diving, and it was on micropore canisters, and so I said to the diver, I'm really sorry, but you can dive to the limit that your rebreather and the micropore canisters are qualified to, and not beyond that. And it created quite a conflict. I actually ended up having to get the micropore manufacturer on the telephone to tell the
Oh, no
diver,
way.
no, we would never want you doing this dive. And the diver's like, well, I've done a bunch of dives like this, like at this depth before, and nothing ever happened. And I'm like, it doesn't make it safe.
Yeah, right.
So
Exactly.
we had to have a pretty hard conversation about that, and not allow him to do those dives.
Yeah, it's a
Wasn't
good point.
popular. I wasn't
Yeah.
popular.
Sometimes you have to be the unpopular one, but
Yeah.
it's important if we all want to get in the water.
Well, yeah, and it's their risk, but it's mine too,
Yeah.
and the entire groups. Yeah.
I have a story from the last Bikini Atoll season. It was not during a trip of mine, fortunately, but there was one case of DCS during 10,000 hours of diving, and it was bad enough that they had to abort the trip. And that's it. It was on the third day of diving.
Right.
And was it preventable? Who knows? I wasn't there. I don't have the case study. I can't be the judge of anything. But the moral of the story is, if you've invested so much and this is really something you've been waiting years to do, don't screw it up by passing your limits. If it's an undeserved bend, then fine. But if it is a deserved one, you're gonna have a lot of angry people with you on the boat, I think. So let's see. Current Joshua Dirks currently under a curfew and water access banned until sometime in May or later. Any tips to stay dive ready, focused for when we can get back out, other than reading your book?
Yeah, well, I think one important thing to just remind people of is we're all getting rusty right now. Like I consider myself rusty when I've been out of the water for a couple of weeks and off my rebreather for a couple of weeks. Well, now it's been about a month, I guess. So we're gonna have to start back slow, jump back into the pool, go through your skills that you originally learned on your rebreather class to make sure your rebreather's fine and your mind is fine and ready to go. Make yourself some little problem cue cards and flip through your notebook and do all of those. But take it slow when you get back in the water. It might be a while. Like I just learned today that the local cave diving site of mine that I'm working in is the property's now completely closed. I haven't been diving there during the isolation just because I didn't think it was right to take a risk that could result in messy things on other people. But now the property's closed anyway, so I certainly won't be going cave diving here for a while.
Yeah, I'm in Kiev, so I'm stuck in a big city until we can get out of here. So we're actually coming to the end of our time for this show. So guys, for all the questions that went unanswered, feel free to reach out to me or Jill personally. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Just like the last very thing for you, Jill, have you got any good advice to the diving community out there? So if somebody's out there, they had guilt trip about being banned, or like any advice, any stigma that you'd like to give people advice on?
Oh, just reach out, talk to someone, stay conservative, be safe.
Exactly.
And come diving with us in truck.
It's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
Because we are going to truck in
We are.
January 2022.
Yeah.
If there's one thing, I mean, we can't go outside, and I'm definitely not the one to advocate traveling anywhere at the moment. But hey, if
Hopefully
I can
things will be normal by then.
in
Yeah.
2022, I mean, if I can't dream about going somewhere, then I'm just going to get a lot more depressed, to be
Yeah.
honest. So if
In the meantime, everyone in truck is doing well. The Federated States of Micronesia are shut right down, but they're
completely,
all
yeah.
safe and maintaining.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys wanna join Jill and I in Truck Lagoon in 2022, feel free to reach out to me or Jill, and we'll give you some more information. So now at the end, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to say thank you so much, Jill. I couldn't have had an easier guest on the first show. This is not really what I do for a day job. But it has been like a closet dream of mine to be a late night host. So I got to live
Careful what you wish for.
So it's been a lot of fun, and just thank you so much.
Awesome.
And I look forward to being in the water with you again.
Yeah, me too. And thanks to everyone who chimed in with some good questions.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So stay safe, Jill, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right. Take care, everyone.
All right. Okay, guys. So we come to the end of the inaugural episode of Coming Clean with a Dirty Dozen with Jill Heinerth. Thank you so much for coming. I want to talk to you a little bit about our next episode, which is going to be on the Monday. So next Monday, the 20th of April at 7 p.m. GMT. And it's going to have a good friend of mine called Matt Jevon. So we go way back, I think 10 years or so. And Matt Jevon is currently recovering from COVID-19. He was actually just did a checkup at the hospital, post-viral checkup from the hospital yesterday. So I thought it was a very relevant topic with what we're all going through right now. And since he's a very experienced rebreather instructor, technical diving instructor, it might just be interesting to see how his experience was and how he dealt with it personally. So that's kind of our schedule for Monday, and we'll be periodically releasing new guests as we go along and get them confirmed. So without any further ado, I'm your host, Aron Arngrimsson. I'd like to ask you to stay safe in these wild times, take care of yourself and each other, and if you feel lonely, we are here to chat dirty. See you later, guys.